So if we've made it this far, you might want to save it. So I'm going to save this project, save as. I'm going to save it in the bottle project. I'm going to call this project bottle 3. Save the Blender file. And before I go any further, before I solidify or do anything, I think I'm going to create the label. So I'm going to step into edit mode. I want to select these vertices all in the center where the label is. I'm going to hit A to deselect all. I'm going to switch my view to the front view, something that lets me see this from a side. And then I also want to switch to orthogonal viewing, so that way I'm two-dimensional. Then I'm going to switch to this little guy down here. Let's see here, what is that little guy called? Link selection to visible. So if I click on that, you can't see any big difference unless I rotate around. So I'm going to click it off, zoom out, and then if I just rotate, you can see I can see through the mesh a little bit. This allows me to select through the mesh. So if I hit B for box select and I select right there, you'll see I've also selected the other side. So that's exactly what I want. Go to view, front again. I want to select all these edges right here. So to do that, I'm just going to hit B for box select and select like this. So I've got all those selected. What I want to do is duplicate this and then separate it out into its own object. So that way I'll have a two. If you want to create a cylinder without caps on top of this instead of doing this, that's perfectly okay. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to duplicate it. But when you do this, the machine won't give you a whole lot of feedback as to what's actually happening. If you look at your outliner, you will see new, you won't see it while we're actually in edit mode, but you'll see it after I create a selection, after I separate it. So with these selected, I'm going to hit Shift D, and then I'm going to left click. So I've created a new mesh, and those meshes is selected and they're sitting in the exact same space as this bottle. And it's also still a part of that bottle, but we're going to separate it now. So I'm going to hit P, and then I'm going to choose selection. And so what it did was it just spat that little bit of mesh out as its own object. And so if I switch to edit mode or object mode now, I can select it as its own object, and that's good. I'm going to hit in, and I'm going to scale that up just slightly. So if I hit scale X, scale Y, don't need to hit scale Z, then it'll sit outside of the cube and it's not actually sitting right on top of the mesh, which is what I want. Good. So next step is to solidify this guy, this bottle. So in order to do that, I'm going to switch to wireframe mode, Z, so we can see the wireframe. So just come over to our modifier, and let's choose solidify. And so let's get up close so we can see how much we're actually making it thicker. And this will make our glass have some thickness to it. So then I'm going to turn up the thickness. Don't want to do too much. If it's plastic, it would be a lot thinner. If it's glass, it's a little bit thicker. So if you're making a wine bottle, it'll be a certain amount of thickness. So if I'm happy with that, I don't see anything terribly wonky. I'm going to switch back to solid. Looks all good. I will apply it. Now, the next step is to create some sort of water for the interior. To do that, we're going to select the inside mesh. And that could be a little bit tricky if you do it by hand. So I'm going to switch to edit mode. I'm going to get really close down here to the center. And then I'm going to select this vertex guy way down here. Not that. I'm going to make sure I'm in vertex select instead of edge select. There we go. I'm going to be careful to make sure I don't have the bottom selected. It looks like from selecting this, I've got the top. I'm selecting the inside center vertex. And what I want to do is select all the inside vertices to separate out the mesh so that I can have a different object on which I can put the liquid material. So to do that, I want to select more. And I'm on my laptop, so I don't have the control number pad plus option. So what you have to do is come over to select and notice what the shortcut is. There should be a select more option here. Select more. You can see that right there. So here I've reprogrammed it for shift equals and shift minus. And so I'm going to be hitting that and seeing that selection grow. Shift equals, you see it popping up. And so I'm just going to carry it all the way up to where I think the top of the liquid would be if this were a soda bottle. If it helps to switch to perspective view, can. So I've got that selected. Now what I want to do is separate this from the other mesh, but I want to leave the solidification. So I'm going to hit Shift D again and then separate again. So Shift D while I've got all this selected, left click to confirm, and then P for separate the selection. So now that's been separated into its own selection. And if it helps to name these so that you know what is what, you can. So I'm going to switch back to wireframe mode. So you can see I have that mesh selected. I have the I have the label selected, and then here I have the bottle selected. So if I select this bottle, go to the objects, I'll call that object the liquid. I'll call this object the label, and then I'll call this cylinder, call it the bottle. And then we see it in our project outliner over here, and that makes things a little bit easier. All right, so we're getting there. A couple of things need to happen now. We need to unwrap our label. We need to add materials. We need to put a cap on here, add lights, and so forth and so on. We're still in Blender render, so we'll have to change that as well. We'll do that in the next part.